Educated by Tara Westover has been one of those super buzzy books this summer. I'm hearing about it everywhere. It sort of smacks a little bit of Hillbilly Elegy, that story of redneck to well-read story of success, but there's a tiny little hint of Million Little Pieces where facts should never get in the way of telling a good story, but more on that later. Tara, spoiler, obviously managed to escape her Mormon fundamentalist background to get an education, more specifically, a PhD in history from Cambridge University. Although, if you think about it, she graduated magna cum laude from Brigham Young University. She got her master's at Cambridge, spent a year as a visiting fellow at Harvard before returning to get her PhD at Cambridge, as you do. And this all from the youngest of 7 barely homeschooled kids, raised by a bipolar, end-times prepper, apocalyptic prophet of a father, and sort of a woo-woo, unlicensed midwife, essential oils, magic healing hands enabler of a mother. I mean, it's frankly amazing that any of the kids made it out alive. Over the course of the book, several of the family members are burned, impaled, brained. One suffers what clearly looks like brain damage. Others lose their fingers, and all of them are treated with magic oils and salves, all from God's pharmacy because of a distrust of hospitals and the man. I mean, hearing about Tara and the conditions that she grew up in, raised in basically a scrap heap, I wanted to get a tetanus shot just reading about it. But let's not dismiss this as a simple Hicktown to higher education hero's journey. Westover is an absolutely fantastic writer, and this memoir has all the pacing and style of a thriller. The book opens, we're introduced to the Indian princess, the Idaho mountain that Tara grew up under the shadow of, and it really helps paint the sense of beauty that was and could be found in her childhood. But from there, you wonder if she's ever going to escape the confines of her rural upbringing, and if she's going to escape the clutches of that fraught and abusive relationship she has with her brother Sean. And from here, it starts reading like one of those thrillers that has girl in the title. Yeah, Tara Westover is basically your horror movie protagonist, and you find yourself yelling at her not to go into the darkened basement, seeing the danger that's lurking there well before she does. And that's to say nothing of the fish out of the water narrative. You wonder if she's ever going to make it out of post-secondary alive. She has no context, no frame of reference. She doesn't understand the movies or the music that her peers are listening to. She doesn't understand the clothes that they're wearing. And then she finds herself in all earnestness in a history lecture, raising her hand to ask what the Holocaust was, much to the horror of all her fellow classmates. And Westover does a fantastic job of putting her struggles into context. You see how insurmountable those odds are that she has to overcome to get that education. But what about those James Fry accusations that I brought up earlier? Well, the family's lawyer would like all the readers of Educated to know that maybe they should take the book with a grain of salt, which begs the question, what the heck is an off-the-grid end-times prepper doing with a lawyer? Well, maybe one that's part owner of an essential oil business called Butterfly Express that employs well over 30 people and generates about $4 million in annual revenue. Add to that, out of the 7 kids, 6 would actually go on to get formal education, and 3 of those would eventually get their PhDs. And those aren't bad odds. That are odds that any suburban middle-class family would be jealous of, let alone some homeschooled rural family. And of those PhD candidates, Tara's brother Tyler, who would get a PhD in engineering from Purdue University, wrote an Amazon review, since removed, but I'll have a link to it down below, where he pushes back a little bit on that narrative and says maybe he remembers things a little bit differently, but he doesn't go as far as to outright accuse her of lying. Personally, I don't think any of this invalidates her story. I mean, Tara understands how malleable memory is, and she tries very hard to get differing viewpoints in, especially with some of those wild her childhood stories. She consults with some family members that she's still in touch with, but not so much that it gets in the way of the narrative. And she understands her role as family historian, perhaps better than most, considering that while she was at Cambridge, her thesis was on historiography, which isn't the study of history, but of historians, and how historians have to come to terms with their own partiality, ignorances, and biases as they're setting down those words, and understand that those words aren't absolute, and they may in fact be wrong in some places, but it's still enough to create a world to live in. Tara Westover is writing her own truth as she remembers it and the effect that it had on her. Well, it's nothing to me if it's a little embellished. I mean, all of us embellish our stories in the telling. It reminds me a little bit of Patricia Lockwood's hilarious narrative voice in her memoir, Pre-Study. And for me, it doesn't matter if it's 100% accurate or if in fact there was semen on that hotel bedsheet. Her telling of it is still epic and hilarious nonetheless. So, Tara Westover's Educated, fantastic read, would recommend. That's it for this week. I hope you guys all have a fantastic week of reading, and we will talk to you soon. Bye.